Welcome to Taking Care of Lady Business, where we put the business back in lady business. Hosted by Jennifer Justice, founder and CEO of the Justice Department, a management strategy and law firm that works with female and woke male entrepreneurs, executives, talent, brands, and creatives to build and maximize their wealth, focusing in the areas of tech, consumer product, finance, media, entertainment, and fashion. Jennifer interviews entrepreneurial women who have done it all, who will be sharing their secrets on all things business, especially as a woman. These highly successful women will share strategies and insights, including what not to do and what it takes to win. And now, here's your host, Jennifer Justice.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Taking Care of Lady Business. I'm Jennifer Justice. Today, we have Marian Leitner. She is the Chief Feather Ruffler at Archer Roose. Okay, so I don't know anybody I've ever met with that title before. We're going to hear all about what that means, but I have a feeling that most of my listeners are a bit of feather rufflers as well. So I think this is going to be fun.
I think most women have that tendency inherently in them, Jennifer, and it's part of what makes life fun.
Yeah. And the funny thing is we don't even know we're ruffling feathers. We're just like being us, but then we're told this. So I like it. You just took it and you ran with it and you're like, I'm going to be that person. Yeah. I love it. The kind of like nasty woman. Remember that?
100%.
Here's
Still
my
on that
pin.
t-shirt.
Yeah. I have my pin right here. My nasty
pin.
Anyway, thank you for being on today. I'm excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be on here, and I love that I get to connect to this group of women today.
I love it. So let's first start by talking about Archer Roose and what is it? And what do you do there? How do you ruffle the feathers?
How do we ruffle the feathers? Well, we're shaking things up in the wine industry over here. So we are building a transparent, sustainable, high quality wine brand that produces wine all around the world and brings it to consumers in kegs and cans. And we do this because most of a wine that's actually consumed nationally is less than 2 years old, and it is consumed 72 hours after purchase, which means that we're not bottle aging wine. And yet 60% of the industry's carbon footprint actually comes from packaging and supply chain. So we're one, trying to help us all drink our way to a cleaner planet. And two, in the process, solve a really kind of, to me, basic need, which is I just want to have a damn good glass of wine at the end of the day without having to open up a bottle and feeling that pressure to finish it. So that's really what it's all about.
Who are your friends that pressure you to finish it? I love it.
Who said it was my friends that did the pressuring?
And so do you have a background in wine? Is this how you got started?
Well, that's a great question. I had a background as a drinker for sure. I was kind of a serial entrepreneur. I loved kind of the operations side of things, and I loved building brands and storytelling. I married somebody who, my husband, he actually got really involved in the natural winemaking movement kind of early on, and then realized he was way in over his head. And so got out of that pretty quickly, but learned a lot about the wine industry in the process. And as we were sort of talking about why some of these challenges exist, those challenges being why is the wine aisle so fragmented? Why do wine brands today feel so disconnected from who the majority of drinkers are? And also, like, why is there so much crap in wine? Like, people don't realize that there are 94 different additives that don't have to be included on the label. They include things like added sugar, food coloring, and animal processing agents. And so to me, there was like a real obvious need that all came down to this idea of like, it was a Monday night. I was around my dining room table and I just wanted to have a glass of wine because I had an early morning flight the next day. I didn't want to have to open up the bottle, and there was no options to do that. And so everything else just kind of felt wasteful. And I just wanted to know why this couldn't be better. And that really was the start of my journey.
And what year is this?
Oh God, 2012, 2013.
Right. And were you working at that time somewhere else? You were like, Yeah, I
Yeah,
heard
I
about
was
that.
actually working for the World Bank. We were living in Washington, D.C. I was literally in a different country every week and trying to, basically help spread education to girls and living in rural developing areas around the world. But my mom had just gotten sick and I was kind of asking myself kind of what life was all about. And I had this crazy idea and I started tumbling down this rabbit hole. So I'd work 10 hours a day and then I didn't have kids at that point. And so I'd come home and work off the side of my desk. And the next thing I knew, we kind of had this business plan. And I had been planning to go get my MBA. And instead, I decided I wanted to do this instead. And so took the money that we'd been saving for me to get my degree and we put into the business.
And Archer Roose was born. And you have to do a little side note. Where does that name come from?
Yeah. So Archer Roose is actually the name of this woman who was really a feather ruffler and a explorer, somebody who really lived life on her own terms. And she traveled the world. And so we wanted to really bring her story to life. So we like to say that, we wanted to create this brand that was unified by a set of values and a profile of the product itself. So fruit forward, dry wine that had a clean label, totally transparent supply chain, was high quality, but had wines from around the world that you could explore. And so we kind of took this fun story, overlaid it with our desire to build this global portfolio, and made it so that kind of each one of these cans were like postcards of places where she'd been. So if you look in the back of our can, we talk about the people, places, and practices behind our wines, which frankly is just terroir, more simplified. But who knows what the word terroir means in the wine industry. And that's really kind of where the name came from. And so it's been a really fun journey ever since.
Interesting. I have never heard of her before, but now I'm going to find out more.
And of course, she's riding a moose because isn't that everyone's preferred mode of transportation? And
I mean, that's how I get around New York City, but that's just
exactly. And the kind of whole idea here is that like life, wine like life should be a little whimsical.
Yeah, true. And so for people who can't see or not looking at this out, Archer Roose is in cans only, right?
Cans and kegs, yes.
And in keg, oh my God, I love it's in a keg.
Yep.
Like, what is a keg made out of? Wood?
That would be awesome. Yes, someday it will be out of a cask. No, it's actually like a recycled polymer. So like it looks like a plastic, but it's made of recyclable material and it's entirely recyclable itself. And it can get hooked up into any keg line. So like, you can get beer on tap and now you can get wine on tap.
Got it. Could you have it in your home?
You absolutely can.
And so are each of these, for the cans anyway, are they single serve or is it one glass? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what's the can made out of? You did this all from a sustainability point of view.
That's correct. So, so the can is made out of aluminum with a lining on the inside. That's a food grade liner specifically developed for wine so that you don't have any leaching into the wine itself. But the cool thing about aluminum is that 70% of all aluminum that's in circulation has been in circulation since the 1950s. It's infinitely recyclable material. We have a ton of it here in the US, thanks to Pepsi and Coke. And it's recycled in every municipality in the US. And what a lot of people don't realize is that in 60% of our municipalities, we don't actually recycle glass. It all just ends up in the landfill.
That's nice and depressing, given it's about to be climate change week in the US. And yeah.
Well, this is why it's like with everything else. If we wait for the government or somebody to come save us, waiting a long time, but we can drink our way to a cleaner planet on our own. Save ourselves.
So you guys you're thinking about it from like not only sustainable, right, but also better for you.
Correct.
Wine. So talk about that. Talk about that whole process and what it is in the wine and how you make it. And you say it's global, right? So what does that mean?
Yeah. Okay. So you're touching on two of my favorite topics now. But let me geek out a little bit, and let's draw an analogy between like what we're doing in craft beer. So craft beer everybody loves because they love the fact that a craft beer is made in their town, right? But what they don't realize is that it's actually made from ingredients that come from other places in the world.
Mhm.
So it's really just a story about the brewer. It actually has nothing to say about where the beer is made. Wine's completely different. So the way that we approach winemaking is that we are telling stories about wine producers throughout the world. And then all of the ingredients for those wines are within a couple miles of where those grapes are grown. So the yeast is wild yeast. The grapes are grown and they're produced at a winery within 20 miles of where the grapes are grown. And that's really important in order to make sure that we can really control this process end to end. So we have relationships with these winemakers all over the place, and we actually need to take a slightly different approach to how we're producing this wine because it's going into a can rather than a bottle. Bottles tend to be really forgiving. The whole idea of like this cork is so that you could have a wine and it could actually change chemically in your bottle over time.
Mhm.
So little, bits of oxygen slip into the wine. You're not necessarily controlling for things like dissolved oxygen and, sulfur. And these are all things that naturally occur in wine. And then you add to the fact that because of the way that most of the wines that we drink, particularly in the US, are made, which is really with an eye towards consistency, but making it as cheap as possible, there's a lot of other additives. And for lack of a better word, I'm going to use, it's a highly scientific one, gunk.
Yeah.
That just gets put in to stabilize it. And so what we do is we get involved from the get-go. So even from how the grapes are being treated in the vineyard, we are really involved in what are the kind of organic interventions that are being made in the vineyard. So here's an example. Sauvignon Blanc grapes, which so many of us love, are highly susceptible to mold. They're often spread with pesticides. We don't do that. But then a organic intervention could often be that there is some copper that's actually used in the winemaking process in order to mitigate the mold. But we don't do that because the copper can interfere with the canning process. And so we're really involved in the details of each one of these steps. We take as low intervention process as possible because we really want to tell that story about how soil, the water, the natural yeast, all of that comes together to create this wine. So you need a really skilled winemaker in this process. And then we actually apply 10 years of scientific research to ensure that our wine is as of a true replacement pour for a bottle. So when you crack one open and you pour it into a glass, you couldn't tell the difference if it came from a can or a can or a bottle.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of last thing that I'll say on this topic is that, we've really learned over time that cans, particularly for the type of wine that most of us are drinking, which is young and fresh, cans are actually a great method to preserve the freshness of the wine. And it just means that you get softer tannins and wines that's more fun and easy to drink, as opposed to a wine that may be older, a little dustier, that have historically been marketed as the highly desired wines, but in reality are out of line with what most of us are drinking.
Right. For the most part. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you learned so much about wine in a very short period of time.
Well, that's why it helps to have always been a drinker.
But the agriculture part of it, that's crazy.
It is crazy.
There's a lot of different grapes in wine, right? It's not, and they're grown in all different places and the soil has to do with it. And, I know in Napa, if there's runoff from this, hill, it tastes different than, all that kind of
Very
stuff.
true.
So it's crazy. And how did you find these winemakers that were down with this, right? It's like such an old business that it's like all traditional families, and they don't want, these new kids on the block, so it's interesting that you found people who are willing to partner with you on that.
Well, I think the wine industry is being forced to change because of
Yeah.
climate. And, the reality is that wine consumption in the US is in decline compared to spirits and beer. And that's a byproduct of the wine industry, frankly, being out of touch with the end consumer and always marketing to the collector as opposed to the everyday consumer.
Mhm.
So wine is really finding itself at a time of existential crisis. And what we have actually found is that, when I started doing this 10 years ago, it was resistance in every corner, but now we are really seeing people clamoring for what we're doing. And, wine producers really want to work with us, which is awesome.
So obviously you started this company, but it takes capital, right?
Yep.
So how did you do that? Actually, you know what? Okay, so you have all these winemakers on board, you start this company, or maybe not in that order, but you need money, capital to do this, right?
Absolutely.
How did you go about that process? What did you do first? Did you raise money? I know you used your MBA, but
Yeah.
you have
So
to.
let's talk in real numbers and let's be straight with one another, Jennifer, because I feel
Okay.
like there is a lot of things that I wish that people had been very straight with me about before I got into the beverage business. And that is that beverage is a very, very capital intensive business.
Yes.
And it's not just on cost of inventory, but frankly, given the category is so crowded, it takes a lot of marketing in order to break through. And so I think it's very important for all founders considering this space to be very eyes wide open before you go into it, which is that you're going to need to raise $30 to $50 million in order to have a successful exit in this space. That's a shocking number. It's shocking.
Yeah.
And I didn't believe it when I first heard it. But it really, I think, has proven out again and again that is the type of capital that's required. So I took
that wine or all spirits?
Oh, I would say this is non-alc and alc.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah. So the reality, what I would have everyone ask themselves first is what is your timeline to build this company before you hop into it? There are people who are prepared to spend the next 20 to 30 years of their life building a company slowly at 10 to 15, 20% growth year over year, which is really admirable, but it's not going to get you acquired. You could have at the end of that day have a really big sizable business that will take care of your family, but it's going to be a lot of work over a long period of time. The big exits that you see in the alcohol business in particular follow a model in which you get to proof of concept. And once you've proven that concept, it takes a lot of money to scale. So that's kind of the first thing. So you asked me to talk concretely about numbers. So I took $100K that I had saved for my degree, and I put that towards brand development, product development, supply chain, and securing distribution. At this point, I didn't have a proven concept. All I had was a product.
Right.
And 100K was gone. The second piece then comes from, what do you do once you get distribution and you're just trying to pilot this in one market? At which point I raised about $750,000 over a multi-year period because I frankly didn't have a huge angel network to draw upon. So it was a lot of really painful rolling closes to kind of rob Peter to pay Paul and kind of pilot this out. So that was the next 2 years. And once we really saw New York gain traction and I had an opportunity to scale across the East Coast, that was when I started to raise my first kind of serious round, which was for $5 million. But at this point, the industry only sees that as a seed round. That's not Series A.
Yeah. Right.
They just wanted to see that okay, with a little bit of marketing, we could see faster adoption than what I had proven out over the last couple of years. So that was what I raised from institutionals. And once we started to kind of see those results, the pandemic hit.
Of course.
And by that point, I had built a company that was very exposed to the on-premise. And the on-premise being bars and restaurants and the travel industry.
Yeah.
And so all of that was wiped out, and we had to completely rebuild our company digitally in grocery channel, and then also figure out how to continue to thrive in bars and restaurants. And that's because we're building an entirely new category. Most consumers don't even know that canned wine exists. So for the most part, you're discovering canned wine because you're sitting on JetBlue and you're ordering one of our wines, or you're going to a concert, or you're at, a really cool, James Beard award-winning restaurant, and you order a glass of wine and it comes with, yes, the glass, but our can next to it.
Yeah.
And so we had to nurture all that through the pandemic, which slowed us down, but also provide an opportunity for us to really see the resilience of our business and that there really was a need there. And upon that, time was when we also brought on our strategic partner, Elizabeth Banks.
Never heard of her.
Yeah. And for her, it was
Elizabeth Banks, the Elizabeth Banks, and director of Cocaine Bear in, many amazing.
Exactly. Many, many amazing movies. And she found us because she was drinking Archer Roose while floating down a river in Utah, and then started drinking us, because she just wanted to have a glass of wine. She didn't want to open up a bottle, and she got involved with our project. And that's when we really started to see everything click again, even though at this point we're still, this is 21. So we're still just coming out of the pandemic, but we picked up speed again. And that's when we went out and raised our Series A to really scale the business.
Amazing. And so what's her involvement in it?
So she's a co-owner and chief creative officer. So one of the things that I've, talked a lot about is the product side. How do we make, introduce consumers to the world of wine more simply? But a huge part of our strategy is how do we use humor in order to make wine more accessible?
Right.
Wine is very serious. It takes itself very seriously. And we like to say that we take our wine seriously, but because we're in a can, we can't take ourselves seriously. Right. And that's where Banks comes in and really, I think, turns really makes it come alive by taking so many pain points for consumers, whether it's taking your recycling out to the corner, or, wanting to sneak a can of wine on the sidelines of your kid's soccer game. Right. And really brings those things to life. Amazing.
And then, so when you did those deals, because a lot of people are doing those kinds of like celebrity driven deals, etc. Who's helping you on that to figure out what kind of deal would work, because I think a lot of people are contemplating that, female founders in particular, and bringing somebody on. Like, what were the considerations that you had?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that I'd say is really category specific.
Yeah.
So look, it's like everything else in this space. It's really easy to do a Me Too, but if you do a Me Too, you're just setting money on fire. You have to figure out what it is you're doing differently and what is the unique problem that you're trying to solve.
Wait, what do you mean by what's a Me Too?
I mean, so here's a Me Too. George Clooney sells a tequila brand for $1 billion.
Yeah.
Therefore, I should go out, get a celebrity to sign on, a male celebrity to sign on, and sell my tequila brand for $1 billion.
Yeah, got it.
That doesn't work. That $1 billion deal has already happened because that, Diageo in this case has already solved that problem for themselves.
Exactly.
So what I urge everybody to do is take a step back and ask, what is my product? Who am I trying to serve? What is the unique value prop that I'm delivering? And then figure out what's the best way to tell the story. And so, for instance, one of the things was pretty shocking was until Eva Longoria, who is actually Mexican, launched her tequila brand, there was no Mexican celebrities in tequila.
Yeah.
So there are definitely some white space out there, but find that white space, figure out what your product is, and figure out who is the right spokesperson for it. Then once you've kind of identified that white space and ask yourself the next following set of questions. There is a graveyard full of celebrity partnerships. Most of them have failed. And I think they've failed because people think, oh, great, I have a celebrity. They've got a built-in fan base. Like, obviously, all of their fans are going to drink my product. That's not the way it works because people can smell bullshit a mile away. So it really has to be an authentic connection, but also it's got to make business sense. So one of the kind of big pieces of analysis that I did was I asked myself, what made the George Clooney Casamigos deal so successful? What made the Ryan Reynolds Aviation Gin so successful? What made Bethany Frankel and Skinny Girl Margarita so successful? And I really broke it down to a few different components. One was each one of them touched on a zeitgeist of their particular time. Bethany Frankel had a lot of vision. Like, people weren't drinking margaritas and tequila the same way, to the same extent that we're doing today. She was really ahead of her time. So first you have to identify what's the wave or trend that you're trying to ride. And again, make sure that that connection really fits authentically. The second piece is, what is the right mode to tell your story? Is it D2C? If so, and then by that, I mean direct to consumer, all e-commerce based. You got to find somebody with a strong digital presence. Honestly, George Clooney's not on Instagram. So like that wouldn't have worked if Casamigos wanted to take that strategy.
Right.
The second piece is, you want to find somebody who is really well known within your target demo. So again, like, you wouldn't have Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's a famous bodybuilder, like try to sell wine to, a bunch of suburban moms. That's not somebody who you're looking towards. And then finally, it's how you're telling that story. Is it humor? Is it, what are some of these like things that you really want to bring to life? And so for us, it really boiled down to, Banks was honestly the only person who I wanted to partner with because she had an irreverent sense of humor that to me was core and intrinsic to the brand. She had a strong social following, but she also was never afraid to make fun of herself. She's very real. And also she is funny as hell. And that was a big thing that we wanted to bring to this category, which is so self-serious. And that's kind of how it all came together for us.
Right. I love that. No, those are real considerations because people just think you can slap it on there and it's going to work. And it's like, they have to be talking about it. They have to be a true consumer themselves. It's got to be authentic. It's got to be in their core demo. Whoever their fan is has got to actually want and care about these things as well, and I grew up in the business representing Jay-Z for a very long time. And, I did these deals from the very beginning. And so I still help female founders find partners. And that's one of the things. It's like, it takes a really long time. So it's not always that an Elizabeth calls you up and says, hey, I want to be a part of this, right?
No, let's really talk here. Then there's the dollar and cents piece of this, Jennifer,
exactly.
Which is like, there's a lot of different ways to structure these deals, which is if you have deep pockets, you can pay a lot of money for that partnership. We did not have deep pockets. In fact, part of what we were asking for was an investment from her. And so there's lots of different ways that you can get creative on how you structure this, but you also then need to be realistic about the type of equity that you're going to have to give up in order to make room for somebody of that caliber in your deal.
And what are they doing for it? When is it investing? And what if they don't do it? Or what if it doesn't convert? What do you do there?
100%. And that's why sunset clauses are like just as important to protect you, the founder, as it would be to protect the star or the talent. And I personally believe it needs to be broken up into 3 different parts. So like one is the service agreement, and make sure that you're really thorough and are very clear about what it is you want in that service agreement. The second piece is performance. So however you're defining that performance, and make sure it ties again to like that service agreement.
Right.
And
so,
third,
so people listening, performance meaning like tying to a revenue goal.
well, it can be whatever. So a revenue goal is obviously, that's a great metric, but I would say that in today's very brand conscious, taking a very brand health approach, you would want a revenue, but also potentially like other key performance metrics underneath it that could also show like what's the stickiness of your brand. So like whether it be engagement on social media, whether it be, how your media performs, there's a lot of different ways that you can look at this in order to make it so that everybody recognizes as a clear-cut idea of what's successful and what's not.
Right. So in the services agreement, you're talking about how many social media posts, what your title is, that kind of stuff.
Yes, to, in our case, production days, product shots, appearances. Like, is the expectation that this person is going to meet with you with retailers?
Yeah.
Are they going to show up and do bottle signings? Like, all of that is things you need to think through ahead of time and know that for the person weighing these deals, there's an opportunity cost to every day of their time.
Yeah.
And the other piece that I think this doesn't get talked about enough, and I might get killed for bringing this up, but like, is the secret costs of doing business with talent.
Yeah.
Like, you and I might just go and get our hair blown out at a, local hairdresser, or like, put on our own makeup and that kind of thing. I've been really lucky, like that Liz Banks is like so is very low key and easy to work with, but it's still, everything around it's still expensive because she's successful and she's used to a certain style of treatment. So
well,
you
not
have
only that,
then,
but her fans are too, right? And her publicity, right? And all those people, trying to take bad shots of people. So yeah, it's called glam hair and makeup HMU. Costs a lot of money. It's like usually around $5,000 at least for a shot, for like photo shoot. So it's not cheap.
yes, definitely.
Yes, I know.
Not even including
and traveling them around, right? You're not getting them a coach seat in JetBlue.
Correct.
In other words, you go to where they are to do the photo shoots and production.
Exactly. And these are all the hidden costs.
Yes, exactly. Why would you get killed for that? That's like something that no one ever talks about, actually.
Totally. And I don't know. I feel like there's this mystique that we're supposed to have around these celebrity partnerships. But I think it is really important as you're building your business case and you're working on your financial model and deciding what can I afford? Or, depending on how much money, almost definitely the talent that you're bringing on is not going to write a check big enough that you're going to need to not only grow the business, but to then like do everything you need to service the business with their attachment. Right. So it's being realistic about what else you need to budget in order for that to make happen. And, it kind of goes from like, I used to do $15,000 photo shoots and think that was expensive. Yeah. And now it's like $100K. Yeah. To do photo shoots. Yeah. And that's because the photographer that you get is better, the quality of the production, the quality of the set, to your point, all of the glam costs. And I think that's something that we all need to be aware of. Yeah. No, it's such good input. And very good way to like break everything down. That's awesome. Look, I know our time is running up, so I can't keep you all day, but if people want to buy Archer Roose, where do they get it? Yeah, that's a great question. Well, you can order it off our website, www.archer, and that's like Archer bow and arrow, Archer Roose, ROOSE.com. And that can just show up right to your door. We deliver to 44 states across the US, or we're available at Target, Sprouts, Total Wine, Bevmo, depending on the state that you live in. And you can actually go to our website and click on find a store near me, enter in your zip code, and we'll let you know where you can discover us, whether that be in a bar or restaurant or at your local store.
What about near 10007?
Well,
Where
I
I am
wish
right
that
now.
my mind worked like that so I could give you the absolute latest, but yes, we can definitely work. I can definitely get you the deets on that specific
I love
location.
it. That is awesome. Okay, so before we let you go, though, I always ask one question in the end, and that is, what is the worst advice you've ever received?
Yeah. So the worst advice I've ever received was, you have to give this your all. That means like, this has to be the most important thing in your life. Everything else comes to the wait side. I cannot tell you what terrible advice that is,
Right.
because none of us is motivated in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
We all have things in our life that motivate us. I have 2 young children and a partner who I adore. And not only do they fill me up so that I can keep going on my hardest days, but they're why I work so hard when some days I would have just given up.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's really important as the other side of that coin is that you cannot have your self-worth be completely tied up in this business, because you will inevitably have to make decisions that are really, really hard. And you will inevitably have to make decisions where everything is on the line. And you cannot do that with a clear head if your entire sense of worth is tied up in it.
Mm-hmm.
So protect your life as much as you can while you build your company. Perspective is your best friend.
Yeah. Wow, that's a good one. I don't think anybody else has ever said that. And you're like interview number 98. So
Hey, I love to try to be original.
woo, love it. Well, thank you so much. This was awesome. This is so good. Like, we just broke down so many main points in building a company like this. And I so appreciate it. And congrats on everything. To everyone listening, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Taking Care of Lady Business. Until next time, I'm Jennifer Justice.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com.